The biography of Carlos P. Romulo. Knowing Carlos P. Romulo. Never has there been a Filipino like Carlos P. Romulo, a diplomat, politician, soldier, journalist, and an author. Carlos Romulo has been an overachiever throughout his life. It was during his lifetime that the Philippines had produced the brightest and the most sensational Filipino statesmen, and he was among them. Though in history books, his name is a frequent print, not too many nowadays remember who he was. Imagine a boy becoming a journalist at the age of 16 years old. When everyone was busy chasing after girls, he was already chasing news. It isn't surprising that he becomes a newspaper editor by the age of 20. With such accomplishments at an early age, you know outright there's going to be more from this guy. Indeed, there's more. At the age of 32, he was already a publisher. He was the first non-American to win the Pulitzer Prize, which is basically the most coveted award for people who write. It only means he writes very well. The first time I read his work was in a book of Ferdinand Marcos, The Democratic Revolution in the Philippines, of which he wrote the foreword. My thoughts were it was an excellent piece of essay, and during that time, I had no idea who Carlos Romulo was. He served a lot of presidents of the Philippines heading various departments, and he almost became president of the Philippines. Carlos Romulo was a nominee for the presidential candidate of the Liberal Party but lost at a convention when Elpidio Quirino pushed for support of the party for his re-election. Romulo left the Liberal Party and joined Ramon Magsaysay as his national campaign manager. Had Romulo become the bet of the Liberal Party, the results might have been very interesting. But what stands out is his contributions to the world. Carlos Romulo was one of the signatories in the Charter of the United Nations. The Charter was the foundational treaty of the member nations of the UN, which is the heart and the soul of the organization. He also became president of the UN General Assembly and the chairman of UN Security Council. Until the last days of his life, he has been in service of world peace and unity. Throughout his life, he has been an agent of diplomacy. In one of his notable speeches, he said, "Words and ideas are more powerful than guns in the defense of human dignity. Treaties are stronger than armamented boundaries. The only impregnable line is that of human understanding. He knows the two sides of the coin as he has seen the horrors of war and beauty of life. His humanitarian efforts to safeguard life are still being felt today. Should we call him a hero? Perhaps knowing more about him and appreciating his contributions is good enough for now." A short story entitled I Am a Filipino by Carlos P. Romulo. I am a Filipino inheritor of a glorious past, hostage to the uncertain future. As such, I must prove equal to a twofold task: the task of meeting my responsibility to the past and the task of performing my obligation to the future. I sprang from a hardy race, child many generations removed of ancient Malayan pioneers, across the centuries of the memory corns rushing back to me, of brown-skinned men putting out to sea in ships that were as frail as their hearts were stout. Over the sea I see them come, borne upon the billowing wave and the whistling wind, carried upon the mighty swell of hope to hope in the free abundance of new land that was to be their home and their children's forever. This is the land they saw and found, every inch of shore that their eyes first set upon, every hill and mountain that beckoned to them with a green and purple invitation, every mile of rolling plain that their view encompassed, every river and lake that promised a plentiful living and the fruitfulness of commerce is a hallowed spot to me. But the strength of their hearts and hands, by every right of law human and divine, this land and all the appurtenances thereof, the black and fertile soil, the seas and lakes and rivers teeming with fish, the forests with their inexhaustible wealth in wildlife and timber, the mountains with their bowels swollen with minerals, the whole of this rich and happy land has been, for centuries without number, the land of my fathers. This land I receive in trust from them, and in trust will pass it to my children, and so on until the world is no more. I am a Filipino. In my blood runs the immortal seed of heroes seed that flowered down the centuries in deeds of courage and defiance. In my veins yet pulses the same hot blood that sent Lapu-Lapu to battle against the first invader of this land, that nerved Lakandula in the combat against the alien foe, that drove Diego Silang and the Guhoy into rebellion against the foreign oppressor. That seed is immortal. It is the self-same seed that flowered in the heart of Jose Rizal that morning in the Bagumbayan when a volley of shots put an end to all that was mortal of him and made his spirit deathless forever. The same that flowered in my hearts of Bonifacio in Balintawak, of Gregorio del Pilar at Tirad Pass, of Antonio Luna at Calumpit, that bloomed in flowers of frustration in the sad heart of Emilio Aguinaldo at Palanan, and yet burst forth royally again in the proud heart of Manuel L. Quezon when he stood at last on the threshold of ancient Malacanang Palace in a symbolic act of possession and racial vindication. The seed I bear within me is an immortal seed. It is the mark of my manhood, the symbol of dignity as a human being, like the seeds that were once buried in the tomb of Tutankhamen many thousand years ago. It shall grow and flower and bear fruit again. It is the insignia of my race, and my generation is but a stage in an unending search of my people for freedom and happiness. I am Filipino, child of the marriage of the East and the West. The East, with its languor and mysticism, its passivity and endurance, was my mother, and Masar was the West that came thundering across the seas with the cross and sword and the machine. I am of the East, an eager participant in its spirit and in its struggles for liberation from the imperialist yoke. But I also know that the East must awake from its century sleep, shake off the lethargy that has bound his limbs, and start moving where destiny awaits.